Okay, welcome to our first of our monthly calls for leadership development. Um, Hopefully, this will be the most awkward and most clunky version of this as we try to figure everything out for technology and backgrounds and lighting and everything. But I think we're doing okay for session one. Um,
Think so.
yeah, for these initial calls, it's just going to be Chick-fil-A specific. In the future, we may bring in some other people from other industries. We're definitely planning on having some guest speakers and things like that. But for you guys, for Chattanooga, the Chattanooga market, it's just going to be for you guys and Chick-fil-A only. Um, but for our first session, we're going to start talking about this concept of leadership DNA. This is some content that we have put together over the course of several years. It's some content that I do with a lot of the leaders and up and coming leaders at the bank that I work at. But it's something that was written to be universal. It's something that can apply for any leader in any industry context. And so we want to be able to share that with you. We're certainly not going to get through all of it today, but hopefully we can start. Um, so again, this will probably be the most awkward, the most clunky, but that's okay. Hopefully we'll improve going forward. Okay, so because this is pre-recorded and we're sending it to you, obviously we can't dialogue like we normally could. So that's the downside to these types of things. But that's okay. The plus side is you guys can go back and rewatch it as much as you want to. So I'll just ask you, Dad, how do you define good leadership? I'm kind of putting you on the spot. I didn't tell you that I was going to ask you this, but how do you define good leadership?
Good leadership, as opposed to great leadership, or as
As
opposed
opposed
to
to bad,
poor
yeah,
leadership.
yeah, as opposed to poor leadership.
I would say good leadership has a lot to do with vision and communication. Because if there's no vision, we know what can happen. But if there's no communication, there's no way to measure success. There's no way to talk about success. Um, it all just starts to fall apart. You can have a great vision, but not have the communication piece where you're talking about what success means
Yeah.
and how we know if we are successful or not. I think those are the two most important uh, parts of it. But I think another one is trust.
Mm,
Like, if you're my leader, I need to know. I need to know that you care about me.
right.
And the people that you guys lead need to know that you care about them. Now, I think they do for the people that are in this part of the program for this market. But I think it's important that they know that you care too.
Yeah, that's good. Um, when we first started coming up with these components for leadership DNA, we we tried to just reverse engineer it and think, okay, what does a good leader look like? How do they behave? What are those universal traits that any good leader in any context would have, so that we could apply it to different industries and things. So, what were those core components? And as a matter of fact, in an early iteration of this, it was even called the core components of the core competencies of leadership. But since then, we changed the name to Leadership DNA. Um, Building off of what you said, great leadership can't be static. It has to be dynamic. Meaning, what has always worked in the past in terms of tactics and strategies may not necessarily work in the future. So if you see someone portraying something of good leadership and say, well, that's how we've always done it, this is how we've always behaved and things like that, it may be okay, but it's not necessarily okay because the day is different, the group is different. There's an old proverb, not from scripture, but an old proverb from somewhere that says that when a man never steps into the same river twice, because he's not the same man and it's not the same river.
Right.
So people change, environments change. So what used to work in the past may not necessarily work in the future, but the spirit or the ethos of what worked in the past should be able to be perpetuated forward. So
So how does that static dynamic thing work when you're at the front counter or you're back at the kitchen at Chick-fil-A? Because you've been both.
Yeah. It you have to keep, this is going to sound cliche, but you have to keep the main thing the main thing. You have to make sure that the spirit of what you're wanting to do and the vision that you've got, like you mentioned, the same vision has to be shared among everybody. It's just the way that they are caring about that vision is going to be different. So the way that someone carries out the store vision, or Chick-fil-A in total, their vision may work differently if you're breading than if you're doing dining room. You know, it may work different if you are taking orders or if you're doing something in drive-through. So it might manifest in different ways, but that mission is still the same. And if it's creating an exceptional customer experience, well, then how does that work? Well, it depends on what you're doing. Um,
So if you're breading, how does that? Where does the customer come into play? Eventually, somebody's going to eat what you're breading. But one thing I think about is who's your customer? Ultimately, it's somebody buying chicken,
right.
but maybe too, it's the next person in the production.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're breading chicken, then your next customer is going to be whoever's frying the chicken. You know, whoever's putting it in the henny pennies. And if you don't do your job in the proper breading process, then it's going to make the frying process not adequate. You know, and if you don't fry the things properly or grill them or whatever the case is, it's going to make assembly different or wrong. And then eventually it is going to come to the paying customer. So anybody that you influence, anybody that you touch in a professional setting is your customer, at least in that moment. So the nature of great leadership has to be this ongoing sense of becoming. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, that it can't be static. It has to be dynamic. You have to constantly be growing, which is why we titled this next few segments Leadership DNA. Because if you think about what DNA is, it's the code of life. The DNA of an orange tree isn't going to produce an apple. It can't produce an apple. The DNA of a human is never going to produce a dog. The DNA of of a person that isn't capable of leading isn't going to be able to produce a good leader.
So like produces like.
Like produces like, exactly. So we compare this to DNA. Obviously, we're not talking about physical components because that can vary. But what is the source code of being a good leader? And so that's how we've kind of distilled it down. I typically think about complex things and by way of analogy. That's just how my mind works. That's how I kind of function, is by thinking about things in terms of analogy. So for me, a good leader is going to be like growing a tree. The reason is because it doesn't just stop with you. I mean, you've talked before, I think you've written before about the dichotomy of potential, how you've got a seed in one hand and a pebble in the other. And the pebble is never, ever, ever going to disappoint you. It's always going to be a pebble. It's going to be a pebble 100 years from now, just like it's a pebble today. But you can't plant that pebble into the ground and ever expect it to become a boulder.
That's all it ever will be.
It's all it ever will be. It doesn't grow. It doesn't have potential at all. Whereas in leadership, and I say leadership in a neutral term because there can be good and bad leadership, but leadership has the potential to create more of its kind. So if it's good leadership, hopefully you're going to be producing good leadership. And if you're a bad leader, then you're probably going to be producing more bad leaders. You can see that in scripture a lot, especially after the split of the kingdom of Israel between Judah and the northern nation of Israel. You can see just a line of bad leaders. And sometimes, by the grace of God, you pop up with a good leader that would bring Israel into restoration with God and things like that. But you would see a line of this, this king did what was evil inside of the Lord. This king did what was evil inside of the Lord, things like that. Leadership, it can happen the same way. Kind produces kind. So for the purpose of this leadership DNA, we're thinking of it like that a good leader is growing like a tree. And so if you're going to grow like a tree, you have to absolutely begin in the foundation, which is the good soil. So as we talk about these different components of leadership DNA, And again, we're not going to get through all of them today. We're not going to get through most of them today. But in the early stages, it doesn't even really begin with a seed. It really begins with fertile ground. Because if the ground isn't fertile, if the ground is bad, then a good seed could be implanted in a bad soil and never produce fruit. Um, so that's kind of what we're going to get into. You got any thoughts before we jump in a little bit?
So people are the seed, they're not pebbles.
Right.
They have potential.
Right.
We could talk about known and unknown potential, but the seed is there, and the seed has to go in good ground. Whose responsibility is it for the ground to be fertile?
It's the individuals.
The leader?
No, it's the person themselves. It's the people that's being sowed into. So you can't do anything about somebody else's fertile ground. You can look for potential in those people, but that's going to come at the hiring process, because kind of segueing into it is the two components of fertile ground for leadership DNA is humility and teachability. You can teach people about humility. You can teach people about teachability, but you can't make them either of those two things. That has to be something that comes from them. Now you can identify it and you can help to shape them and things like that, but that potential is either there or it's not.
So what can they do with what they have? Because they have the soil that they're working with,
Mm-hmm.
their seed, there's some kind of dirt, some kind of ground there.
Well, it's because not everybody in their stores is going to eventually become a good leader. I mean, just being an employee of Chick-fil-A doesn't make you all of a sudden magically have potential to be a good leader. That'd be great if you could. And I think Chick-fil-A is the type of environment that's conducive to growth, probably like none other, or at least not most places. But not everybody that walks through the doors and that gets employed by Chick-fil-A, they might be a rock star breader or a rock star front counter person. They might be a rock star bagger. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be a good leader. You can still lead those people. You can still help to influence them and help direct them and things like that, but that doesn't make them a good leader. But if you see the potential of humility and teachability, that's the fertile ground that established leaders can start pouring into next generation leaders and helping to grow those leaders beneath them. Does that make sense? So, real quick, we're going to talk about humility, because it's the first component of this fertile ground of leadership DNA, and humility probably gets misunderstood more than any other component of leadership DNA, because a bad understanding of humility is this sense of insecurity, almost. At least that's how it gets translated. That's how it gets manifest. Is people think, well, if I'm humble, then that means it's the opposite of pride. So I can't be proud of anything that I do. I can't be confident in anything that I do, and that's just not true. So like a bad understanding of humility is having a feeling of insignificance or inferiority. You don't have to be inferior to other people. You don't have to feel inferior to other people in order to remain humble. That's why that type of mentality is called false humility, because it feels like it's humble because it's not prideful. So it feels like it's humble, but the concept I'm going to try to convey today is that there's not, it's not a binary to where you either have to put yourself down constantly, or you have to have an inflated ego. So we're going to talk about that. So it's not self-degradation, but a good understanding. And if you look it up in the dictionary, I think it's Webster's, that says that humility is freedom from pride or arrogance. When I first looked into this, you would think that humility says absence of pride or arrogance, but it doesn't. It says freedom from pride or arrogance. And I think there's some scripture behind that too, because pride comes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. So if it's freedom from pride or arrogance, then that pride or arrogance is going to lead you toward destruction, and this is freedom from that path. So that's a better understanding of humility.
The story about Ben Franklin and his 12 virtues. Of course, he could correct me and say, Dad, there are 13 virtues. But originally, Ben Franklin had 12 virtues. And he went to some of his Quaker friends and said, hey guys, look at my virtues, and I'm working on these every day. I've got this little book that I've made. I'm paying attention daily and weekly to these 12 virtues. And a couple of his friends said, these are really good, man. If you do this, this is powerful. And then they added something. They said, you probably need one more, and it was humility.
Mm.
And he thought about it and added it. Well, towards the end of his life, he came back and said, I think I did really good at 12 of the 13, and the one that I didn't do so well at is humility. And I guess there's two schools of thought there. That if he had said, "Oh, I nailed humility. I'm the most humble person that's ever lived. Nobody's ever lived that's been more humble than me. I nailed that one." I wouldn't be very humble. But he said, it's humility that I didn't nail, and maybe it was because it wasn't his. So it's just like you said a few minutes ago. You can't cast that on somebody.
Yeah.
You can help lead people.
You can
down that road and help teach them. So if there's bad soil, maybe there's still hope.
Yeah, and don't misunderstand me. Bad If there's bad leadership soil, that doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to be a bad employee. It just means they may not be ready to be a leader. I don't know how it is in y'all's store, but whenever I first started at Chick-fil-A, for whatever reason, people thought if you bagged really well, if you're the bagger really well on a Saturday, then you were poised for leadership.
Hurricane.
You were going to be a manager. You're going to be a leader, because literally I would have people come up to me and say, "Hey Adam, I bagged last Saturday." Like, oh, okay, great. Well, I mean, I did really good. Like, we didn't get in the red once, and it was a busy Saturday, and I'm really, really good at bagging. Okay, good. I'm proud of you. Okay, so when am I going to get promoted? It's like, I don't know how they made the leap. I guess because you see a lot of managers jumping in that position and bagging. So they just conflated, I'm a really, really good bagger, to I can now lead a team. That I got that, and I've been here for 6 months. When am I going to be in leadership? It's like, well, tenure doesn't make you a good leader.
People come in thinking, if I do a good job. And it wasn't necessarily anything that you guys told them.
Yeah, no.
I mean, it was not anything you guys
right.
told them. But they come in thinking, if I don't get in any trouble, I'll be a leader.
Yeah. And there are people who can be a champion in a position that shouldn't be a leader, because they just don't know how to lead people. And a pitfall to fall into is that when people think if someone's a champion in a position, and it can be in Chick-fil-A, it can be in banking, it can be anywhere. I'll put it in a banking context. If somebody's a really, really good teller, that means that one day they'll be a good branch manager. And that's just not true. Or if somebody's really, really good at bagging at Chick-fil-A, that means that one day they'll be a good store manager or front lead or whatever. And that's just not true.
I know a chairman of the board of a bank, not his bank, but I know a chairman of the board of a bank who started as a teller, and they said he never balanced one day.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the simple part of being a teller. You balance every day, but he didn't balance one day, but he's chairman of the board leading a successful bank.
Yeah.
So it can work. It can work both ways, and even in football. I mean, if you look at there are a lot of football coaches who played, but they weren't necessarily great. Now that there's no correlation, like if you're good, you can't be a good coach.
No. It's not at all. They're not having a high skill level in what you do. Certainly isn't mutually exclusive from being a good leader. It's just not necessarily what makes you a good leader. I really like what Rick Warren said. Is he said true humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. Which kind of goes into what we were saying before, is you don't have to put yourself down. I mean, you take Jesus as an example. Never once did he say, "Oh, I'm not God, or you shouldn't worship me. I don't have the ability to do such and such. I can't raise the dead. I can't save you." He never did that. He never doubted his own ability. He never downgraded his own ability in front of people. But what he did do is he used his ability for the good of other people. And that's really the difference. It's not about putting yourself down. So, I mean, I would even challenge the thought of Benjamin Franklin. I think that he could have truthfully said that he was humble, as long as he was truly humble and he made it about other people. If he was taking pride in his humility, then it would have been kind of an awkward.
Well, yeah, if he says I'm the most humble person that ever lived, but yeah, he could have.
So you can think of it this way, that humility is not self-loathing and it's not self-degradation. It's simply the understanding that your position, your vision, and the authority that you've been given is meant to serve a purpose other than self-glorification. So if you're going to nail humility, you think of it more so for, hey, all of this stuff that I've got, the fact that I've gone through coaching certification, the fact that I'm learning to become a better leader, I am a good leader, and I can recognize that I'm a good leader, but it's not just so that I can lord myself over people. It's so that I can help them. Because the mark, I mean, I'm going to give you guys a look into the future of where we're going with leadership DNA. The mark of a good leader is in their ability to produce other good leaders, not necessarily just in I ran a tight shift. Running a tight shift matters, but it's not only seen in that, it's in your ability to produce other good leaders. Any thoughts?
No, that's really good.
Okay. We will send you guys, help me remember, we'll send you guys a graphic of this thing that we wrote up called the humility matrix. And like I said, one day we'll probably have this stuff up on the screen and it'll make it a little bit easier. But you can think of a spectrum of focus on self and focus on others. And these are the two opposite ends of the spectrum. Self-degradation is closer to pride than people think, because they think, well, if I'm not prideful, that means I need to put myself down. Well, that's still vanity, because the focus is on self. And that's the difference between true humility and false humility. The reason it's called false humility, self-degradation is false humility. The reason it's false humility is because it feels like it's not pride, which it's not, but it is still vain. So the person who walks into a room and says, I want everybody to look at me because of how awesome I am, that's prideful. That's inflated ego, right? That's an inordinate amount of focus on self. That person is considered vain. However, the person who walks into a room and says, I hope nobody sees me, I don't have anything to offer, I'm junk, I'm trash, I'm not any good at anything, that person is as equally vain as the person who walks in, because they're still thinking about themselves. They're just looking at themselves in a negative light as opposed to a positive light. The problem with both of those is it's still a focus on self.
So how should you walk into a room?
So you should walk into a room and think, here are the skill sets that I have. I want to continue to grow in the skill sets that I have. Who can I help with those skills? Who can I help make better because of what I've got? And then the focus is on other people. I mean, literally, you can take the cues from Jesus. I mean, he raised the dead, he healed the sick, and he told his disciples, he said, you'll do greater things than I did, which is a tough pill to swallow when you're talking to God. You know, you'll do greater. But he wasn't saying like you're going to overtake me in power and things like that, because that's not what's happened. But he was teaching a leadership principle. He said, look, I'm going back to the Father and I'm giving you authority, and you're going to do things more widespread than even I've done. But it's because he was instilling those principles in them and giving them the authority to do it.
Well, even Paul said, I hadn't made it yet.
Yeah.
But this was what I do.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can look at focus on self at one end of the spectrum, and then you can look at focus on others at the other end. So that's the x-axis, but there's also a y-axis of high benefit and low benefit. So if you kind of think about it in quadrants, that upper left quadrant would be pride, because it's high benefit to you for a period of time. It eventually leads to destruction, but it can feel like high benefit to you, but it's a focus on self. On the lower left-hand quadrant, it's self-degradation. There's no benefit to anybody, but the focus is still on you, which is a terrible place to be anyway. So if you shift it completely over to the right-hand side of this quadrant, again, I'll send you guys a graphic, either I will or Dad will, and you've got focus on others, there is still a low to no benefit on others on that other side, and that's just well-intentioned recklessness is what I call it. And that's where your focus is on other people. You do genuinely care about other people, but you don't have a clue what you're doing. This is where skills come in. This is why skills matter, because you can be humble and genuinely care about other people and still be of no benefit to them. Have you ever dealt with somebody in your years of management and the different roles that you've served where they genuinely cared about other people, but their ideas were trash? I mean, I'm not asking for names, but like,
Um, I'm sure I have.
yeah,
We'll leave it at that.
yeah. I mean, I can think of several people in different fields that they genuinely care about people, but their ideas just aren't well thought out. They're just not whatever, they're not being beneficial to other people. Their intentions are good. You can work with that. You can kind of build into that because their intentions are good. But that upper right part of the quadrant, and again, I'm going to send you guys a graphic, but that upper right part of the quadrant where it's focus on others, but it's a high benefit, that's what we're calling beneficial confidence. Because confidence is good. You need to have confidence because if you don't have confidence, you're going to fall into that self-degradation, which again is vanity. But if you want to have a high benefit to other people and being able to focus on other people, then it's that beneficial confidence. You've got the confidence, you know what you're talking about, but it's not just so that you can look big and bad and I'm only in leadership so I can delegate to people. It's no, I'm in leadership because I have something to offer and everybody else around me is going to benefit for it. How are we doing on time?
Good stuff. Maybe we take a few more minutes.
Okay. I'm just going to say a couple of other things. The focus on self is easy because it's our most carnal instinct, and to some degree it's okay. You got to have self-care. I mean, Jesus said, "Love others as you love yourself." If you don't have self-love, then you can't love others, right? Jesus first, others second, and yourself last. Yourself is still in that equation.
Well, it says love your neighbor as what?
As yourself, yeah.
As you love yourself.
Yeah. So the focus on self is natural because there is some self-preservation involved. You got to eat, you got to sleep. You need to train your mind, your body. You need to be all there. But shifting the focus to where it's not self only, it's others also. And that's the kind of the other pitfall that you can fall into. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to put all my focus on others and I'm going to run myself ragged to where I have nothing left to give. And you can't do that. Like, you need to have proper rest. We can talk about that. I think it's month 8. We're going to talk about the full octagon.
And we'll talk about sharpen the saw.
Yeah. But you got to be able to rest. You got to be able to focus. You got to be able to train your mind and your heart and things like that and your skill set. So there has to be some focus on self. But if all of your focus is on you, which again is a natural thing to do, then you're not going to be a humble leader. You're not really going to have that fertile ground to build off of if you don't put an appropriate amount of focus on other people.
So obviously this is not a coaching call. It's some leadership development type things that we're doing for you guys. Here's a question to land this plane, so to speak.
Yeah.
Thinking about what we've talked about today, you and I know that in a coaching call, most of the time somebody's going to leave with an action plan or this is what I do with what I just heard. Hopefully this resonated with you guys and you understood it and it made sense but if you're not able to take it into your store or into life, it was just good stuff and we did this cool little video and that was it. How do they take what you've talked about today and into the store as a leader, who they are, what they think about others and themselves?
I mean, I quote him often, but I think one of the greatest minds in coaching is Daniel Harkavy, and I've heard him say and read what he's written that self-leadership precedes team leadership
all the time.
You can't lead a team effectively if you don't lead yourself first. And so when you're thinking about leadership DNA, especially here in the beginning with this foundational, with this fertile ground thing, I guess a takeaway or an action plan between now and the next call the next video is to be thinking about ways how you can shift your mind to become more humble. Now, for some of you, that's going to look like being confident in your abilities, not putting yourself down all the time. It might be rewiring on what humility actually is. For some of you, it's just going to be good old-fashioned dropping your pride. When you care about what's right instead of who's right, you're able to make that transition from pride to actual humility a lot quicker. Because if you go into a situation and it's like, well, I made this call in the past and I'm the leader and I got to stick with this call, even though I know that it's wrong. I've got more information now. I've seen how things are played out, but I'm going to stick to my wrong decision because I'm the leader. That's pride, because it's not really about the benefit of everybody around you. It's about sticking to your guns when you shouldn't. So the action plan is to consider how, if any way, how you should shift your mind, maybe from that pride over to focusing on others, or from that same area of being vain and vanity is shifting your mind from, okay, maybe I don't have this self-inflated ego, but I'm putting a whole lot of attention on me because I'm trying to keep everybody else away from me. I'm trying to not be the person who comes in and is seen all the time. It's like, no, you've got the skill set, you've got the authority. Obviously, everybody on the call or that's watching the video is a leader of some kind. So you've been given some level of authority. So how can you use that authority for the benefit of other people? Would be my
Perfect.
would be my takeaway. So
Yeah, and that's something great to journal. Just ask yourself that question: how can I use the authority that I have? How can I use this position to help other people? Which takes us back to Irrefutable Success University. And as you guys go through the lessons yourself and begin to go through lesson by lesson with other people, the questions are already there for you, and you can, as you're walking through that, they're going to see that you're investing time in them, and that entire conversation and those questions are all about them and not about you. So you automatically do this by going in and asking the questions.
not only that, but and I know they've already worked through at least the first part of month one of ISU. When you're considering your purpose, if your purpose only benefits you, it's probably not your purpose. It's got to be not necessarily against you. I mean, it's going to be for your benefit, but also for the benefit of other people. So even as they're working on and fleshing out their own purpose, part of that is going to be an appropriate understanding of humility. And it's, God has given me a purpose. He's given me a mission to do, and he's also given me the skill set, or at least the potential to gain the skill set to fulfill my purpose. And so even just in month one, week one, it starts with that idea of humility. Like, I need to have the skill set. I don't have to bury it. You don't want to put your light under a basket, but how can I use that light to shine brighter, not to draw attention to me, but to help other people?
I guess maybe to close out, I was on a coaching call with a leader this week who was working through, or had been working through, the first month, the first four lessons of ISU. And one of the questions is, if I live out my purpose, who else is going to benefit? And there was some eye-opening, started to say eye-popping, but revelations there that the person had never really thought about. They knew they were a leader and they were doing well in their store, or they wouldn't be involved in coaching, but they see it a little differently than they did before, because it forced them to think about my purpose, helping other people.
Yeah.
So maybe the last thing we'll talk about today is, go back and read what you wrote in that question. Now, obviously, you can't log on to Irrefutable Success University and go back and look at your answers, but you have an email that was sent to you. So whatever, you just go back to whatever lesson you want to review, and you have your responses that have been emailed to you. So it's there for you.
And think about what you wrote for purpose with the new lens of this better understanding of humility. I mean, were you writing out your purpose, but you're holding yourself back because you thought that it sounded more prideful, when in reality it was just having confidence, beneficial confidence? Or on the flip side, did you write out your purpose and it was just this inflated sense of self? And so go back and kind of look at what you wrote down for your purpose, and applying this new lens, this new filter of appropriate view of humility, because it is the first component for leadership DNA.
So I think finally, one question that we have for you guys is obviously we had some technical things we had to deal with. I hope what we just did worked. It looks like it's recording.
Mhm.
So I think everything did okay, but we just want to make this better for you guys, and we know that it's hard to get everybody at the same time on the same day to come to a conference room. So we're gonna do it this way, but we want you to know that we're available for you too.
Yeah.
If the lead coaches and the operators have our contact information, if you have any question, you want to talk about something privately, feel free to do that. And we would love to know. Even is the lighting okay? Is the volume okay?
Yeah.
Is the picture clear? Little things like that too. The length, even we've talked about. Is this better for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or 45 or an hour? I know Adam and I could probably sit here for 3 hours and talk about
Sure.
leadership
Yeah.
stuff, but that's not good for you, and we want this
We
to
want it
be
to be
good for you.
beneficial for them. Yeah.
Yeah, we want this to be good for you. So, as we close out, any closing words you want to say?
I don't think so. You guys are awesome. I loved being able to go through the coach certification stuff with you. Can't wait to hear your success stories as you start implementing some of this stuff, and look forward to seeing you all in person soon.
We look forward to it. See you guys.